Oh hi, we can see you there.
Hi.
Would you like to learn about the Renaissance?
Yes, I would.
Well, come along, we've got a lot to talk about. On what you ask? Why, just one of the most famous art pieces in the Renaissance. The Renaissance, a cultural, political, artistic, and intellectual that paved the way for human development. Today, we'll be taking a closer look into one of the most famous paintings and icons of the Renaissance and of all time. It is
The Birth of Venus.
The Birth of Venus was created by Sandro Botticelli in 1486 in Florence, Italy. But who was Sandro Botticelli, and how did he become one of the most famous Renaissance artists? We're about to find out.
Alessandro di Mariano Filippetti, who would later be known as Sandro Botticelli, was born in Florence, Italy in the year 1445. As Sandro Botticelli grew older and finished schooling, he became an apprentice goldsmith under his father, Mariano Divani di Filippetti. Sandro Botticelli soon finished being an apprentice goldsmith, as he preferred to paint over goldsmithing. This led his father to place him under an admired Florentine painter by the name of Filippo Lippi. Filippo Lippi taught Botticelli techniques as well as stylistic choices which would influence Botticelli's work. Filippi then left Florence to go to Spoleto, leaving Botticelli to continue working on his frail figural style. Throughout Botticelli's career, he painted in many different genres, from religious pieces to the secular genres of portraits and mythology, to his later works that dealt with mannerism. His mythological paintings include La Primavera, Venus and Mars, Pallas and Centaur, and of course, The Birth of Venus. Later in Botticelli's life, he became one of Savonarola's followers, and it is rumored that he burnt some of his own paintings in the bonfire of the Vanities.
Halloween is right around the corner, and that means that it's time to pick up this year's costume. If you want to be something creative and original, look no further, because we have the perfect costume for you.
Oh no, I have nothing to wear for Halloween. This is perfect.
This year's Sandro Botticelli costume is better than ever and will help you stand out this Halloween. This costume features a portfolio of Botticelli's most popular pieces, which are The Birth of Venus, La Primavera, and The Adoration of the Magi of 1475. Along with a toga resembling the one he wore in The Adoration of the Magi, a paintbrush, and a little barrel. A fun fact is that Botticelli is a nickname his brother Giovanni called, which translates to little barrel in English.
Is that Sandro Botticelli? Yeah, it is.
This costume will become the most popular in 2017, and you can get it right now for only $15.75. Now back to the scheduled program.
Now that we know a bit of a background on the creator of this beautiful piece, we can take a closer look at the Birth of Venus, or Nascita di Venere in Italian.
Here we can see the main focus of the painting. Venus, the goddess of love, seems to be arriving on a scallop shell to shore after being birthed from sea. This process was called Venus Anadyomene. To the left of Venus, we can see Zephyr, the god of wind, who is holding the young nymph Chloris and using his strength to blow Venus to shore. Finally, to the right of Venus, we see the Aura, or goddess of springtime, standing ashore, waiting with a cloak to give Venus. This painting, which is now located in the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, Italy, was easily accessible and based on sensory details, which led to immense popularity.
There are many details in the Birth of Venus that can be analysed, so today we brought in an art student who has been studying at the Royal Institute of Art for 7 years in Sweden. This is Myrtle Mort. Good morning, Myrtle. How are you doing?
Splendid, just seizing the day. Carpe diem.
Now, before we begin, could you tell me a little bit of why you decided to go into the arts?
Well, in a nutshell, Earth without art is just...
Now, could you tell me a bit about Sandro Botticelli and the Birth of Venus?
Yes. So, Sandro Botticelli was one of the most famous artists in the early Renaissance. He was born in the city of Florence around 1445 and lived until May 1750. Throughout his life, he painted many famous paintings. Along with the Birth of Venus, he painted the La Primavera, Mars and Venus, Saint Sebastian, and many, many more. The piece is very similar to La Primavera in that Venus is in the center. She is isolated with no other figures overlapping her. The Birth of Venus was likely commissioned by Medici. It is not clear which Medici, but the painting was likely commissioned by Lorenzo di Pierfrancesco. under the influence of his cousin, Lorenzo the Magnificent. The art piece is one of the world's most famous creations. It was painted during the years 1482 and until 1486. The theme of this piece stems from Ovid's Metamorphoses, an important oeuvre of Latin literature. The Birth of Venus also references the Stanzas, which is a famous poetic work done by Agnolo Polizano, who is the greatest Neoplatonic poet of the Medici court. The Birth of Venus is one of the first examples in Tuscany of using canvas as the painting surface. Sandro Botticelli made the colors bright and durable by using alabaster powder. He used many of his time's newly developed techniques. Most obviously, contrapposto. Venus is standing with an S shape and her hips are at a different alignment than her shoulders, and it looks as though she's alive and engaged with the world. Would you care to demonstrate? Gladly. He also included linear or atmospheric perspective. For example, the sky and the ocean both become lighter as it is closer to the horizon line, making it seem more like the actual atmosphere. He added a lot of movement to the piece. There are many aspects in the painting that seem to have emotion. This technique made it much more realistic. There is a significant attention on her hair and hairstyle, which reflect Botticelli's interest in how women wore their hair. Wonderful. Splendid.
Not only is this painting just wonderful to look at, but it also gives us an insight into the new ideas that individuals were having in the Renaissance. New emerging conceptions of the individual are most evident in the painting in three ways. The first being secularism, or beliefs that reject religion. This is conveyed through not the presence of God, but rather mythological figures, sensuality, and paganism. The second new outlook is humanism, a system attaching prime importance to humankind. You can see this through the prominence of nudity, which was uncommon at this time, and the detail that was put into facial and other body features. Lastly, new conceptions were evident in the presence of Neoplatonism, the desire to achieve the perfect or ideal lifestyle, and virtue, a sort of manliness or power that men strive for during this time. Next, we're going to talk to three people who have an extraordinary understanding of the ideas behind this painting. Alright, so now we have here Miss Molly Maeve, a student at McKernan, I'm assuming?
Oh no. I'm in first year university.
How old are you?
I'm 12. I skipped like 4 grades.
Oh my, so you must be quite the keener then, hey?
Oh yes, I actually prepared a lot for today. So could you ask me about secularism? Because like that's the area I focus on.
Alright, tell me about secularism then.
This extraordinary painting that Botticelli has painted portrays how God is less important to the individuals of the day extremely well. The Birth of Venus has no relation to Christianity and instead focuses on the fascinating idea of Roman mythology. Roman mythology may not have been just portrayed in Botticelli's work, but also in many other Renaissance paintings due to the fact that during this time individuals were trying to recapture the former glory of Rome. This want to restore Rome to its former glory shows the philosophy of classicism that was very prominent at this time. Mythological gods and creatures in this painting would have been considered pagan characters in the medieval time, but was considered pagan changed dramatically in the Renaissance, which is what allowed this outstanding piece to be made. This painting also demonstrates paganism because it was clearly influenced by the Roman culture, so much so that Botticelli actually based the pose of his Venus off of a sculpture called the Aphrodite of Knidos, which was made in the 4th century. Sensuality is present in this piece through the exposure of Venus and other subjects and becomes more desired for one's pleasure during this time. The Birth of Venus was originally supposed to be hung over a married couple's bed, hence the... Can I say it?
Yes?
The sexual appeal.
Alright, so here we have historian Barbara Brown. Barbara, could you tell us a bit about how you see humanism portrayed in The Birth of Venus? Are you okay? Is it dry in here? No. Do you feel it? Is it dry? No.
I don't know why the manager told you, but I have to drink like a liter of water every 10 minutes. Do you mind if you just...
Okay. Alright, so we're back from a short break. Where were we? Oh yes, humanism. Could you start off by telling me what that is?
Well, it's a cultural and intellectual movement of the Renaissance that emphasized human potential to attained excellence and promoted direct study of the literature, art, and civilization of classical Greece and Rome. So in the piece, the nudity of Venus portrays an aspect of humanism. This is because it shows that they are starting to relook into human anatomy and are increasingly interested in the human body. Similarly, if you look closely, you can see that the hands and feet of each individual are very detailed. On the contrary, in medieval paintings, the hands and feet were usually ignored by most artists and rarely looked natural. Also, we can see that there is an obvious difference in facial features between different characters. Each character in the painting is unique and has different facial features and clearly look like different individuals. This shows how many artists were starting to value individualism and personal details. Humanism includes a focus on the motion of everything. Each character seems to be in motion. The realism throughout the piece was very rarely seen in art pieces during the medieval period.
Alright, so here today we have Miss Gina Jenkins. How are you today, Gina? Okay. Miss Gina here has a PhD in Renaissance Studies.
Yeah, from Yale.
Oh, really? Mm-hmm. Wonderful. So Gina, could you tell me a little bit about how you see Neoplatonism featured in this piece? Gina?
Sorry, did you say something?
Yes. Would you mind putting down your phone so we can stop this interview? It's a formal interview.
Some people.
Alright, so now that we have your full attention, would you care to tell me a little bit about this piece?
Yes, so the Neoplatonism present in the birth of Venus is most definitely shown throughout the piece. So the goddess Venus is representative of a divine love, an ideal love, if you will. In fact, the painting as a whole could be seen as a perfect state of being, which of course is what Neoplatonism is all about, striving towards that ideal perfection. And Neoplatonism as a whole really tried to connect Christianity and Roman and Greek cultural heritage. So in the birth of Venus, this philosophy is seen as showing how spiritual beauty and the birth of love are the true driving forces of life. The Renaissance value of virtue can be defined as this prowess and this willingness to do the hard work, the noble work, essentially a sort of manliness, which the wind god Zephyr in this piece represents perfectly. The fact that Zephyr is carrying the wind nymph Chloris, this shows how Zephyr is willing to do some grunt work. He's also blowing Venus to shore from sea, again representative of his willingness to do the hard things, which was a very important aspect of virtue at the time.
These ideas are obviously present in this piece, but now the real question is why? How did Botticelli gain these new ideas, and more generally, how did the Renaissance? Well, to start off, the Renaissance was a time period or movement that began around the year 1400 in Florence, Italy. As you may or may not know, this time period was coined the Renaissance, a French word meaning rebirth. This is referring to the rebirth or revival of teachings and ways of life from ancient times, in particular ancient Rome and Greece. The Renaissance came with a major shift in the way people thought about life. In the Middle Ages, people hadn't accepted the idea that life is meant to be hard and there was little to it other than work and war. Alright Molly, can you explain to me a little bit more about why you think these ideas of secularism were present during the Renaissance?
Okay. Well, there are many reasons of why these new ideas and the Renaissance in general happened. One of the main reasons was when there was the fall of the Byzantine Empire. Their capital, Constantinople, was taken over. So then all of the scholars who were in Constantinople fled to the safety in Europe, and not only did they bring themselves over to Europe, but also their knowledge and ideas. They then spread their knowledge which the Europeans had lost, allowing them to revisit ideas they had once known, and also some new ones. Another reason that may have helped this transition period into the modern age was because of the
Black Death.
Even though the Black Death caused tremendous tragedies, it allowed for some mobility between classes, which allowed some lower class families to move up socially, like the Medicis, and become patrons of the art. It also caused people to question the church's emphasis on the afterlife and started to focus more on the moment. To be more specific as to why these new ideas are present in Botticelli's Birth of Venus was because Botticelli grew up his whole life in Florence, the center of the Renaissance, and was bound to be influenced by the ideals around, especially the new ideals his early Renaissance mentor, Filippo Lippi, had. Botticelli also would have been influenced to make the secular piece due to the fact that the Medicis are the patrons of it, and at the time they were pushing for more secular pieces. Paganism and classism are evident from the fact that Botticelli turned to the Greek and Roman art and literature to get ideas for his painting. The Birth of Venus. I'm sorry. The Birth of Venus even focused on human beauty and nature, which was similar to the Greeks and Romans.
The ideas of humanism came from peasants, nobility, and merchants who were starting to strongly oppose and voice their opinions against the values and teachings of the Christian church. Many avid followers of the church split from it, and the church lost its trust of their supporters. When these individuals split from the church, it allowed them to explore ideas of individualism. This caused a ripple effect on others, as many people became intrigued by watching other people, just like them, transition into a world where their lives on earth became more important than their afterlives. Some of these people were painters, sculptors, writers, and poets. They took the social change that was happening in their world and portrayed it in their art through the using realism, naturalistic techniques, and creating secular pieces.
These new present ideas allowed the art to look completely different to medieval paintings. For example, the Ognissanti Madonna, painted in the year 1310 by an Italian artist, Giotto da Bondone. This piece depicts the Virgin Mary with the Christ child sitting upon her lap. Around them are many angels and saints looking on in awe. This work is often a celebrated painting of the medieval time.
The medieval painting Ognissanti Madonna is quite different from the Italian Renaissance painting The Birth of Venus. One of the more important aspects that has obviously changed from the Middle Ages to the Renaissance is the idea of individualism and perspective. In Ognissanti Madonna, all of the angels have the same face, showing no individual characteristics, because during that time period, particular groups and classes were painted as the same individual due to the medieval value of conformism, the goal to fit in and to belong within a group. The angels are also much smaller than Madonna and Baby, because Madonna and the child are of higher status and importance than the angels, and because they are the main focus of the painting. There is also less attention regarding the human body characteristics. The most notable one is the hands on Madonna, as they look severely elongated and non-human-like, while in The Birth of Venus all of their hands look much more realistic, showing the Renaissance value of human accuracy due to their interest in human anatomy. Another difference is that this medieval painting is a religious painting of Mary and her child Jesus, while Botticelli's painting is not considered to be a religious painting, as it is centered around Roman mythology instead. Finally, the Madonna and Baby painting has absolutely no depth to it and looks as though it is flat, while the Renaissance painting has some visible depth, as it looks as though the ocean and some of the land goes beyond the four figures in the front of the painting.
During the Renaissance, although they were moving toward the modern age, there are still many ideas and events that occurred that today's people would find slightly peculiar. Although there are many differences between the medieval painting of Ognissanti Madonna and The Birth of Venus, there are still some medieval ideas present, since these new ideas are still progressing. This means that there are limitations to these new ideas, which can be seen in The Birth of Venus.
The main limitation to this painting is that the characters look as though they're floating and that they're not affected by gravity. Also, the way Venus is standing on that shell looks as though it is humanly impossible. This shows that The Birth of Venus is hardly portraying naturalism like many medieval paintings. Another limitation that is not visible in the painting is one that happened during the end of the Italian Renaissance, where a monk known as Savonarola convinced people that parts of the Renaissance led to moral corruption. So they had a bonfire of the vanities where people brought items of sin to burn, and Botticelli himself attended and burned some of his artwork. This shows that although new ideas were forming, many people still thought of religion as a much more important aspect of life than life itself, which completely goes against Renaissance ideals.
The Birth of Venus is a truly amazing piece, but it's practically impossible for only one painting to fit all the new individualistic ideas that were expressed through artwork in one piece. So what are some other ways that art showed these new ideas?
The Birth of Venus is an outstanding piece of artwork, but many other paintings that were in the Renaissance too showed other concepts that happened in the Renaissance that the Birth of Venus wasn't able to capture. So one other astonishing painting in the Renaissance was The School of Athens by Raphael. It shows individuality so well that every character he made has its own individual face, facial characteristics, and clothing. Every subject seems to have its own movement. No two people are doing the same thing. The School of Athens also shows a tremendous perspective and portrays the ideas of naturalism and realism. You are able to see this through how realistically all the figures Raphael has painted look, and how the people look as though they are under the Earth's gravity. A sculpture from the early Renaissance can show the Renaissance ideas starting to form, and that piece is the David by Michelangelo. Michelangelo's David demonstrates humanism as it is completely focused on the human body and makes it look quite accurate. Also, the beginning of the idea of virtue is seen because of how Michelangelo decided to make David look immensely strong by his detail in David's hands and the focus and concentration in David's face. And then there is a different David that is by Donatello, which depicts contrapposto stance often seen in Renaissance work, as well as a broad hint at homosexuality, which is shown in the positioning of the feather on David's thigh. So as you can see, the Birth of Venus was most definitely not the only piece of artwork to showcase Renaissance values by any means. Okay, well, thank you for this opportunity. I really enjoyed it.
Do you have any other examples of Renaissance art that display these new conceptions of the individual?
Another art piece that portrayed new concepts of the individual that were forming during the Renaissance was created by Masaccio, who lived from 1401 to 1428. He was most famous for his painting of the Trinity in the Church of Santa Maria Novella around 1426, and the Brancacci Chapel of the Church of Santa Maria del Carmen during 1427. These two pieces had a high degree of humanistic naturalism, and they are considered to have a high intellectual nature. Humanistic naturalism is a branch of philosophical naturalism in which humans can understand and control the world through using the ethical values and social aspects of humanism along with scientific method. Two other pieces that portrayed similar concepts were Piera della Francesca's Baptism of Christ and Paolo Uccello's Battle of San Romano. The Baptism of Christ used symmetry, the golden ratio, and a mastery of perspective to create distinct-looking individuals and depth. The Battle of San Romano used perspective to show realism, unlike the Baptism of Christ. This piece was entirely secular.
As we have seen, new conceptions of the individual began to develop during Renaissance times and are now shown in the Birth of Venus through the presence of secularism, humanism, and Neoplatonism.
I'm Teresa Todd, and this has been another episode of Terrific Talks with Teresa Todd. See you next week.
That's a wrap!
Thank God I'm going home! Yeah! Fetch my jacket!
Okay, Molly, you ready for this? Yes. I'm so ready. Let's start. Okay. No?
You literally just have to read off. I don't know how to say those words. Renaissance. Jane.
Okay, so.
Like, I said it wrong. How do we know that?
What is happening?
Can you not? Can you not? Stop.
Was that all of it?